the agenda of today, what is the formatting system? We will look at doing simple formatting. Custom isn't necessarily simple, but I will show the simple defaults, and then we will look at how we can do some more advanced formatting stuff. We will look at one of the possible futures where we're taking a formatting system. And when we get to that point, you will understand why I want to talk about the future. So, if we think about what PowerShell does, we have this wonderful pipeline where we get all the objects. But objects are just patterns in memory. I read those patterns in memory on a daily basis, but most of you don't. And PowerShell makes a way, way better job of making it readable than the Visual Studio Debugger, for example. So we need some way to take those objects and present them to humans in a way that is presenting the information in such a concise, consumable way as possible. So to do this, they created the formatting system, which is a very, we could call it engineered system. Rude people would say over-engineered. And one of the properties of this over-engineered system is that it is based on types. Format data is stored on a per type basis in a database that exists in the execution context. If you remember the execution context, which is like the core information store for a PowerShell session. It keeps track of everything that the runtime needs to know. Out default is a core piece of that, because, or of the formatting system, because if you haven't said anything else on the pipeline, and if you haven't redirected the output to file or so, then PowerShell will append out default at the end of the pipeline. And out default will look at what's coming. If the first object that's coming has 5 properties or less, it will render it as a table, deeming that, okay, this is small enough, so I can show it wide. And it's a more dense view. Otherwise, we format as a list. And in the table case, there's an interesting thing to be smart about how wide should I make each column. So when the first object drops into out default, and it sees that, okay, this is small enough, I'll make a table. It calls a little function and asks that function to call me back in 300 milliseconds. And see what objects you have received by then. Calculate the best width for these objects, and then render the rest of the output with that size. And you might have seen this, that sometimes this works perfect. And sometimes you get a few objects in the beginning that are like, they have very short strings. And then everything will be sized, well, suboptimally. Anybody who has run into this? Yeah. Did you understand why? Do you understand why now? Yeah. Hey! So, we have a few, let's say, global options that we can toy with. In the type system, there is a set of properties, one of them that is also stored per object. It's called the default display property sets. It's a set of names of properties. And these are the names, these are the properties that should be rendered by default if you don't say anything else. All the formatting commandlets can take properties and you can customize it. But if you don't do it, this is what will be used. And you can fiddle with this, and we will today. There is also a default display property. And this is used when you only want to have if you must select a single property, which one should that be? Okay? That's used when you say format wide, and if PowerShell needs to render objects in a collection. If one of the objects that you have chosen to render is actually something that is enumerable, PowerShell uses the default display property of that type to project that as text. There's a global variable. Hands up who knew about format enumeration limit? Who have ever heard of it? No. 1, 2, maybe. Cool. So when PowerShell has to enumerate the collection to show you, how many iterations in that loop should it go? And you can toy with that, and we will. And then there's some cool thing. In an attempt to be smart, and it actually works fairly well. If an object, if you haven't set a default display property, PowerShell will try and see, well, it might have a name, or an ID, or a key. But here comes the funny part. This is from the source code. I just found this because it behaved so weirdly. So if it doesn't find a name, ID, or a key, it looks for something that starts with key, or starts with name, or starts with ID, in that order. And this is where I just get speechless in English. In Swedish, I always have words. That's like the language of the gods and the heroes. But in English, I didn't really know what to say here. What engineer, like all developers have some form of like obsessive compulsive disorder. And look at the order of this, like name, ID, key. Okay, I could find like if it was reversed, but it's not even that. It's just weird. So if you see this behaving weirdly, you know why. There's one exception that can also explain weirdness you see, and that is this will not happen if the type that you're enumerating, that you're trying to project to text, has a toString, and not inherited, that the type itself has an implementation of toString. Because in that case, toString will be called. Did you hear somewhere that this system was kind of engineered? Okay. So, setting the stage here, we will, as sample data, use superheroes who fight crimes at night. So this is as and that's Windows P, right? This is as big as it's going to get. So if you want to move forward, please do. To start with, I just this is the content of superhero.ps1. It's a simple class that has a set of properties, but to show the features of the formatting system, I also have powers, abilities, and weaknesses that is actually collections. Okay? And they are of the type name description, which has a name and, some of you guessed it, a description. And then a simple function that imports the hero. Hands up who knows what output type does. Wow. This is one of the most useful features there is when you write functions, because it tells the type inference system what will come down the pipeline, and it gives you tab completion for the properties of the object coming down the pipeline. You should always, or not when you're just hacking along, but when you try to make something more serious, make a class and annotate the function as I've done here with the output type. It's hugely beneficial in everything you do in PowerShell. But as this is a formatting presentation, let's format this as color. Just to show you the differences when you read the one and you read the other, how much easier it is when we actually make use of colors. That will be a theme during this presentation. So I'm loading this class and importing the heroes. And this is what the formatting system renders by default, which is actually awesome. Without writing a single line of code, I have projected objects, which are just bit patterns in memory, into something super useful. It's already good. We can make it better, but it's already good. This is one of the superpowers of PowerShell. It has excellent default rendering. And then you can toy with it, which makes it really, really fun. So, you remember the default display property set? One of the things in the type system that you could fiddle with per type. So for the type superhero, let's make name and power the default properties and import them. See what happened? Why did it become a table? Hands up who think you know. Exactly, less than 5 properties now. We only have 2. Let's make it a table. It makes sense. And you can also see now, do you see the curly brackets? Do you know what that means? It's a collection. And it has shown the elements of the collection. And if you thought about it, this is the thing where the secret properties entered. Because in the collection of powers, for example, we had a name and a description. Oh, name. If you don't have said anything else, let's try to see if you have a name property. In that case, I will use that. That's why we got that text. Update type data. And since this is a formatting presentation, and because I love doing this, we can split it. So we remove all the... I'll show you. So, with a simple regular expression, we can extract the things that we actually are interested in. You see the difference in perception when you get colors? Something that draws attention to what you actually want to see. These two are the parameters that we can use for formatting. If you had been looking at the wall of text, you wouldn't have known. Even worse so with this in the beginning, right? So, now we'll put the heroes in an array. PowerShell will give us an array as its multiple objects by default. And I know there are multiple heroes, so we will get an array here. And we'll look at that. You see that it renders the name of our heroes because of this magic weird default mechanism that works really well. So now we change the default display property to alter ego instead. And what happens? The default rendering of it changes. This is an awesome system that you can, like, if you figure this out, you can start to use it producing so great formatting of what you want to see. And we will look at, you can provide named views, so you can give multiple views for your objects. In my case, I look at like huge crash databases for games. Okay, some of our games sometimes crashes. And when they do, we get reports of that. And some of the guys, they want to see okay, is it a GPU crash? Then I'm interested in this set of properties. And others are looking, is it a hang? Okay, then I want to see a completely different set of properties. Somebody wonders, when did this build happen? A third set of properties. And you can create views to make this super easy. Now, we're going to step back and look at this format data, the data in the format database that was stored in the execution context, but that's irrelevant because you get to it through commandlets. Get measure object, I guess you all know that, what it is. Yeah. When we get you can see the type of this as something Microsoft PowerShell commands generic measure info. So let's see if we can find some formatting data for this. Close, but no cigar. We found something that deserialized Microsoft PowerShell commands generic measure info. That's not really it, is it? And this is when me reading through the code find this. Well, if we didn't find a perfect match, let's try to strip deserialized and try again. Okay. Given that we know that, it's a perfect match. So this is the formatting data. Cool, right? Information at your fingertips. This is a way how we can actually get to the deserialized data, just to check it. So I'm running the same thing, but with PowerShell, and lets it serialize the output to me. And when we look at it, it's like the same thing. But we have now generated this into a custom PS object, but we've given it names, type names, that says this is where it came from. And the formatting system and the type system can use these. So, format generic measure info, meet, format custom. This is format custom. How many have used format custom? A few, yeah. It's kind of, everybody shows format list and format table. But format custom has a default feature that is super useful, and it displays the whole structure of an object graph. Check this out. You see, like, this is what the classes contains. They have properties, and then in their turn they contain format definition, which is a list control, which is a list control entry. Did I say the system was engineered? But then something strange happens. We get list item control items. Why didn't we see more? And we have this ... dots. This is what I'm talking about. Enumeration limit, remember the global variable? Now we don't have the ... dot anymore. But we still have these. But with format, with depth, we can control how many levels down we will render this. Okay? Are you following? And here you can actually see what kind of data it contains. Should it have a different label? What property should we display? It can be a script block. Item selection condition. That's something we can evaluate to determine should we display this at all. And a formatting string. Quick demo of the weird properties. We have a class with only name, one with only ID, one with both, one with none of them, and one special key class. And when we create an array of this and look at it, if you go back after this demo, when it doesn't go this fast, you will see these properties when it selects the name, the ID, the key, etc. by default. And if it doesn't find any of it, it uses toString, which by default is the name of the class. Okay? So, you remember I said that a type is what's controlling what view is being selected in the formatting system? Yeah. It's not always a type. Oh, sorry. Sometimes it's types. You can make sets of types that all should, like these types, should be used for this view. And the simplest way when you write this, it's to only specify this is the property I want to have displayed. You can add a script block saying only displayed if. And by the way, format it like this. Enough talk. Where's the code? We're doing this again. Lazy Biker, if you don't know him, you should looking him up. Jason Shirk. He provided this sample of what we should do instead. Woo! Yeah, maybe it was intended. This was what he wrote. He just added to measure info, just remove the stuff that isn't, nobody has asked for and isn't set. Let's see where I was here. Moving on. Now we're going to load a list view for our heroes. We're going to look at it then. Oh, there's Jason's load view. Here, we import our heroes with a default list view, and the only thing we can notice here is that there's no weakness for Spider-Man. There's no empty array. And now, looking at our superhero, we have a selection set that says, if a superhero is coming down the pipeline, use this view. You should show the name, alter ego, place of birth, etc. You should add a format string saying the length is actually in centimeters and the height is in kilograms. And by the way, only display the powers if they have any, etc. Okay? I also made for the Americans, so they can understand that like kilograms is 0.454 kilos is 1 pound. And another view for the Brexiters, where we have it in stones. A stone is yeah. A stone is 14 pounds or 6.36 kilograms. And there is some bug in the get format data system, because there is a third view. The first one would define the ISO view. Isn't returned. I don't know why, and I haven't yet debugged, but I will debug after the session. So if you find me later, we can look at it. Format table. Still simple to write, a little bit more verbose. We have a couple of extra options. We can say wrap and auto size. Auto size tells it, don't wait 300 milliseconds. Check all the output and determine how wide things should be. It makes for a slower response because you don't get any output until everything has come through the pipeline. And wrap says, if you have long strings at the end, make multiple lines for each item. Really, really useful as options to control. This is not how I write it. I wish it were. Instead, this is probably the most verbose XML dialect I ever saw. And you see the small dots here, meaning this isn't it, because this is part of it, and this is part of it, and it's so verbose. Here's a small piece of it with only 2 properties rendered. This is for 5 if you had written it in code, but the XML is so verbose. It's actually hard to edit because you lose context of where you are. But XML was super popular long ago when this was being done. And it's really easy to be like, with hindsight, saying that, oh, you should have done it with JSON that wasn't invented, or, yeah, you get it. Same thing. We load our superheroes, and we import the table and look at it again. You see, we're formatting alter ego differently, centering this, and we strip a few columns, and just a different view. Format table, it's you can group displays, but this doesn't really work well if they aren't sorted. Did you see, like, we first get the group height 183, then 178, etc. But if we sort it first and group it, you get them each one by one. This is, by the way, what's happening when you output directories and files. They group the files by their directories. And you can do crazy shit here. Right? You can even, like, in this case, like I'm grouping on if each like 10th centimeter of their length. So PowerShell is so wonderful. It's like you really have superpowers. Everything you want to have done, it can do for you. I can't say that this is really simple, but it's there for you. You can do it. A quick look here at the table format. You set up a header, and then you say what columns should be there and how they should be aligned. And then you say, okay, what things should go into the data. This is, if you don't listen to anything else, stop now, clear your mind, listen to this. This is what you use when things go wrong and you don't understand why. The formatting commandlet has display error and show error. If you don't remember anything else, remember that, because that will help you when you try to figure out what happened in your formatters that went wrong. I'm gonna show you how that looks. So, can you spot what's about to go wrong? Divide by 0. That's almost always bad. And nothing happens. But with display error. Oh, hey, did you see that something went wrong? Can you show me what? Nifty, isn't it? It's super nifty, but it also makes this system really, really complex when you try to, well, when you debug it and try to figure out how it works. This shit is hard. Here's another thing. Have you seen this before? Really show me the error. I mean it. I want to see it. Or format custom, you remember what that did? Gave the whole like object graph view. And by toying with depths, etc. here, you can get screenful after screenful of information. But this thing, you wonder what actually went wrong. The information is there. You just have to know how to display it. Cool? So, now we will move into a bit more of advanced territory with the format custom, and it has some fairly advanced functionalities. Actually, I think most of it was developed to help render the help system. The help system passes through the same thing as everything else, but with the demands for much more text formatting and stuff. So you can tell it to enumerate your collection, but display it in this way. Not just with a default display property, but you can actually say, use this control, use this view to output this. And you can control expression binding fairly okay, custom control name. That's how you select what control. A control is a set of XML goo that will tell the formatting system how to output your type. But in a way where you can actually name the XML goo. Expression binding is a way of like, I'm hiding a bit of information, but basically is it what property and what script block is it that we're interested in. Frames are being used for indentation and for like pushing the output, like, do you say right and left margins is probably the right English words. And this XML is also quite verbose, but let's first look at a demo, and then we will look what was it that produced the output we saw. No, sorry. We're importing our hero and looking at it first with format custom. You see now that we see all the text that was previously, in previous views, we saw them in shorter forms. And we see the sub-elements enumerated. That was how format custom did it by default. Alias for format custom is FC, just like FT for format table and FL for format list. You have FC for format custom. So here comes our new hero. Do you see that Daredevil is a little bit brighter? You see we have this. Here's the powers. Oh, he has abilities too, and weaknesses. Abilities is now formatted as a list. You see that name and description are formatted as a list, but indented. Okay. Powers were not really rendered either as a table or as a list, but as something really custom. And the weaknesses are rendered as a table. So here we can really, in format custom, we can control a lot of how things are going to look. There is a real hardcore option too, without much of the XML, and that's that you actually implement the string or a function yourself that outputs a string. And then you tell the formatting system to just call this method, and then you do all the work in code. That's like the big gun. We had many heroes. Sorry about that. You see this in basics here. We have a superhero this view is selected when a superhero comes down the alley or pipeline. One of the things you can do is say, here comes just text, right? This weirdness is how you start a color selection in XML, which is like, it's double escaping of things. The X1B, 1B is, we'll get to that, but that's escape. That's the ANSI code for escape. And that's how you express colors in VT100, which the terminal now uses. And this is where I stop using colors. Restore the foreground again. Okay? Remember when we saw Daredevil a little bit brighter? That was done by that. We have an item selection condition, and you see yet again these color things that made powers green, abilities yellow. It's not the most easy to read, but it's a bit right only. But this is how you do it. One thing to notice, powers were, I said they were custom rendered. That was achieved by saying delegate this to this name description collection. That's the name of the control that you should use to do that. For abilities, I cheated a bit. I just took the abilities and formatted them as a list and let the formatting system deal with it for me. Okay? And same with the format table. So this is a bit meta. Like in the formatter, I tell it to format. You can do, it won't be the fastest. So if you have a lot of data, I really don't recommend this. But it's not dog slow either. So feel free to try it out if you feel it's useful. And we skipped something. We delegated the name description collection to the controls. And here's when things get a bit weird. If regular expressions don't come really natural to you, you have probably missed Matthias Jessen's sessions on regular expressions. If you have, you should really try to attend them next year. I hope there will be a 4.0. He does a great job of explaining them, and they are so useful. I stole this from him, which basically just say, make the line 40 characters wide. So it didn't cover the whole section. I have a frame for indentation. And I definitely don't expect you to go home and understand this. But I expect you, if you are interested in this, toy with the samples. There are a lot of samples shipped by Microsoft, like samples meaning in the distribution. Or you look at these examples from here at the material at the GitHub later. Given what you saw before, this is the alias for the command that I annotated, import heroes. When we look at this again, you remember the text block with a start the highlight? Power is in green. This is the collection that is rendered by the control that did the crazy regex stuff to get these 40 characters long. You saw we formatted as a list and we formatted as a table, but the item selection condition made sure that it didn't appear because it didn't have any weaknesses. Useful? Colors. When I say they are dog ugly to look at, I don't mean the colors, I mean the expressions you have to write to get the colors. There are 3 dialects of this. One is for when you just have 16 colors. Then you have this backtick E, which is like escape. A bracket and a number. And the number has, of course, to be either between 30 and 37 or between 90 and 97. Obviously. Unless you want 256 colors, because then you can type backtick E bracket 38, 5, and a value between 0 and 255, which will select an entry in an index in the color table. You have no idea what will be there, but you will get a color. And the big sledgehammer here is when you get full color. You can actually select RGB with 0 to 255 and get millions of colors. A lot of them. So in PowerShell 6, you have this backtick E. It was recently added to not have to do the char 27 thing. But you can say $E is char 27 and use $E instead. So all hope is not lost unless you're on an operating system where Windows doesn't support VT100 color codes because the console is told this is a Windows 10 feature. And you really should upgrade anyway. Looking at colors. Do you see the fancy font? I'm so proud. And here actually comes something useful. You remember the wall of text? Like, what was it actually I was searching for? It's somewhere in here. So Lazy Biker, yet again, Jason Shirk, provided the first idea to this, and we also have to blame Turkey. And then that's when you should ask, why? Because I was on vacation in Turkey and got really bored. So I took what Jason had done, and then I fiddled with it. So the result of that is this match info v5 format. It's v5, PowerShell 5 was the first to support this. So now we select the same things, and do you see the difference? I was actually looking for property name, and when I search for this, property name and script block. But do you see the difference in how easy it is to spot the results? We're looking for, I went to the PowerShell source code and searched for, yeah, I guess you all recognize the functions for the build module in the PowerShell source code. And it's just so, we make the get functions yellow and the noun there green. And if it's not, we make it red and select the first 40 of them. Do you see the difference? Like, the color is such a boost, right? Just another example. Philosophy text. And some simple, regular expression. And what do you get? These functions, how they look, they will be in the materials. I'm not going to go through them now. But color outputs the text or default psconf EU in this case 16-bit colors. Then we have more colors. That's a 256-bit version. And I included the option to actually print the codes that you need to use to get the color. And you guessed it. And this, when I did this, it's a real cool effect how it feels like I'm just scrolling back up, but you get the visual effect of you can see there are a lot of colors. And this I had to skip, like everything that wasn't evenly divided by 10, I just skipped, because otherwise, especially with my console rendering screen, I waited for hours, because you got many colors. And when you print them like two lines a second on this, it was horrible. But you can fiddle with the code if you really want all of them. And if you should add escape codes, you get like all the, this is what you need to, yeah, I didn't say they were pretty, I said they were dog ugly, but they are useful. This is like a theme here, but Jason Shirk also wrote PS Readline. Do you know what PS Readline is? It's this wonderful thing that makes what you type in the console colored, and you can search back in history. And Jason is probably one of the sharpest guy you will ever meet if you meet him. He provides options for PS Readlines. And this is a super nifty reference. If you just, oh, how was it? When I wanted red, what should I write? I just get PS Readline options. Oh, it was 91. Cool, right? Useful. And he had the decency to provide a formatter that actually printed the colors in the color. It's useful. Learn it, use it. Profit. 5%. PS More is a possible future of formatting. It's a pet project of Lazy Biker, Jason Shirk. Let's attempt to get rid of the formatting XML. It's slow to parse. Describe the formatting much more succinct and with more options to tweak it. So this would basically say like the same thing that we did previously. when it should run, and how you should position things, etc. Here's how you could do the rendering of a get process, as we do today. And compared to the meters, that's like a few feet for the Americans, of text, we get a very succinct way of doing this. And he's doing something else. He's looking at converting, instead of the formatting system today, it looks at every object and reflects on it and try to find out what to do. He does this once per type, generate an expression tree, a link expression tree, which is like a description in code that you can compile to IL of what needs to be done. And then this only needs to be done once per type and commandlet, like how you want to format it. And then invoke. And it will be so much faster. Well, the future it's bright. This is still just incubation. It's not a promise. It's a GitHub open source project, but it's done by a guy that has so much horsepower that it has very good. If he just gets time to work on it, or if we will help him, this can be a very good, very nice future. Daniel? Huh. Hey, Joey.
I learned a lot.
So, to summarize, formatting is super useful. It's the thing that most people have just, okay, I can format as a table. But you can hack this. And you can do super useful thing with it. Learn it, use it. 5%. Colors makes a difference. And I just love PowerShell. Joey?
Yeah, not a question, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that awesome BT100 ANSI formatting thing you saw in PS Rewind is not available in the existing version of PS Rewind. It's in the pre-release version of PS Rewind 2.0.
Oh, sorry, I never noticed because I'm always on like the bleeding. Sorry about that, guys. My bad.
If you install PS Rewind with the allow pre-release flag, you'll get all that fancy stuff, and we're going to be integrating it into PowerShell soon.
Sorry, I really should have checked that better. Didn't. Yeah.
Can we get a happy Joey on the speed so I can take a picture of that? Can you stand next to it?
Yeah? Shoot.
You're not using right host.
The question was, I'm not using right host. No, I'm not. I'm using the formatting system. It's a presentation about the formatting system. Right host is a part of the hosting API. And yes, that has been traditionally the only thing in PowerShell where you could get colors. So I'm using something completely different here. I'm using the capability of the Windows console host to render colors. And the technology in that is really, it's like old as Jeffrey. Or even older. But it works. And the Unixes has used this forever, and we are like finally getting it in Windows. It's a bit tricky. You have to remember to like turn colors off, because if you start using it, the console host will keep using it until you tell it not to. But that was actually a very good point. that no, this is not right host -4 color, etc. Thanks. That was very clarifying, because that could easily be confused. Any more questions? Yes? If the question was, if I use this in a log, then I get all the color codes in the log file, and the answer is yes. But if you remember, what I started saying was that out default is added if you haven't redirected to a file. So if you want this in a file, you should pass it through your formatter and add out string, and then pipe it to set content to a file. Or maybe out file will, correct me if I'm wrong here, but out file will also invoke the formatting system. So you would get this thing if you use out file, but if you pipe it to set content you want. Should I explain that more clearly? I saw many blank faces when I said that. So the concept is, we have this pipeline and we have objects. And if it's text that you want, like what you do get in the log file is text. But if you have passed that through something that formats it with color, we get all these garbage characters. This is done by the formatting step. And that is not invoked if you pipe it to set content. Because then the pipeline stops, and like the objects that are coming in are going down to file. They don't continue through the pipeline if you actually don't specify dash pass through, which would defeat the purpose in this case. But yes? Yeah, but T object is before you get in, then you get objects in a collection. Yeah, yes, you can use T object or dash out variable, which is even easier nowadays, to get like, save the objects before formatting and save them after formatting and choose what you want where. I think the best you can do is go home and toy with this and see when does formatting happen and not. But the thing is, it's happening as the last thing if you haven't added something that we know stops the pipeline. And out default won't do anything if it doesn't get any objects, even if you add it at the end. Was it? Did it answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.